This podcast of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs is sponsored by AAA Heating and Air.
The premier HVAC company in the Midlands is growing. Are you a top HVAC technician?
AAA Heating and Air is looking for dedicated applicants to fill their fast-growing service department with top-notch HVAC technicians.
If you're the best, then they want you. If you're ready to stop working and start a career, you can earn up to $100,000 plus a year at AAA Heating and Air.
Quality candidates will have at least 2 years experience and a good driving record. Benefits include top industry salaries, commission on service and unit sales, set call limits, company-provided take-home vehicle and gas card, company-provided cell phone and tablet, health, dental, and vision benefits, 401k retirement plan with company match, and scaled PTO based on length of service.
Contact Roy and Dana Finley at 803-677-1500 or check out their job postings on Facebook or ZipRecruiter.
AAA Air when you need us. AAA Heating and Air.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs, founded by firemen, with Chris Clark.
The 2007 South Carolina class was, at that time, 6th in the country and 4th in the SEC, which is amazing.
Wes Mitchell.
You know, I think if you're South Carolina, you're aiming to at least be at 50%. Then in theory, you're adding talent, you're getting better, you're putting yourself in a position to compete.
And Tyler Head.
It's been a great week for South Carolina. On the recruiting front, still certainly plenty to talk about.
On the home of the Gamecocks, 107.5 The Game.
And welcome into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head and Wes Mitchell along with you today. Chris Clark will be back with us next week. Thank you once again to Tanner Bailey for joining us for the Garnet Trust Hour last hour. If you did miss that interview, I'll have it up shortly for you on the 107.5 The Game podcasting page. Great interview there. Lots of insight into what's going on with the Gamecock football program and one of the more interesting commitment stories that we've heard up to this point for Tanner involving Disney World.
Yeah, shouts to Tanner. I mean, I thought he was really good. First time doing radio in a while, and definitely the first time doing it here. I thought he gave us some good stuff. And, you know, I think I mentioned it on yesterday's show. It was unique following it as well. We had actually kind of thought Tanner Bailey might be one of, the first commitments for South Carolina for the class he was in. And Carolina really focused in on him. He was the first quarterback offer of the Shane Beamer era. And, you know, it kept looking like he was going to visit, and then he never did. And then he committed to Oregon. And then South Carolina sort of went about their business, get Braden Davis, ended up getting Spencer Rattler. And then it was actually a complete shock. It came with a coaching change at Oregon that sort of opened up his mind. And, you know, then the early signing period was sort of weighing down on him. It was time to make a decision. He, you know, having, I believe he mentioned it, his dad, you know, was an athlete as well and kind of understood, hey, a quarterback, you know, you can be really good and kind of lose your spots,
right,
if teams are only going to take one. So he kind of, I guess, circled back. South Carolina was willing to take him and ended up committing. And I literally remember that interview because it was so loud in the background. And Tanner actually was as nice as he could be, because I didn't expect a recruit to answer when they're at Disney.
Sure.
He's like, hey, man, I got like 4 minutes. What you got? And we just like knocked it out like that.
Yeah.
Which I was much more, he thought he was being rude. I was much more appreciative of the fact that he was like, hey, let's just do this and knock it out. So I got my quotes that I could post on the website. And yeah, like he said, he committed and signed sight unseen.
Never set foot in Columbia.
Yeah. And then took his visit before, actually took his visit before he enrolled, but after he had already signed. And nobody was on campus then either. I didn't know that piece of it, that the team was at the bowl game when he was taking his visit. And so then ultimately, yes, ends up at South Carolina. And probably, you know, we talked to him. I was kind of interested to see his answer about, I know every quarterback wants to play. Every quarterback wants to be the guy. Every position is quote unquote open.
Right.
But we know Spencer Rattler is a starting quarterback. And I kind of got the sense from his answer, too, he knows that as well. He's not blind to that. But, the fact he brought up, hey, I'm a redshirt freshman. He's got eligibility. He's got a lot of eligibility left. And I think this offseason has been about just getting settled in, progressing as a player individually, and putting himself in a position to where, maybe he's that third guy behind Rattler and Luke Doty.
Right. And obviously, throughout the spring, it's been an ongoing competition. We've obviously heard a lot about Lenora Sellers, and we'll finally get to see, as fans more, finally get to see what everything looks like coming up Saturday with the spring game at 7 o'clock out at Williams-Brice Stadium. I know you kind of led things off with asking him about, everything with the new offense and Dow logins, and I feel like, gosh, that question's been asked 10 million times already this spring, and he didn't really offer too much that we haven't already heard, that it's different, it's a little more simplified, but he, like everybody else has said so far, seems to like it.
Yeah, he likes it. He wasn't willing to give us much more than that, which I respect, but I did find it interesting that he brought up Sean Ryan. Mm-hmm. And, a lot of times when you interview people, they're going to give answers. Like if I had asked him about Sean Ryan, he was going to, I'm sure, say good things about Sean Ryan. But it took interest for me that he brought up Sean Ryan on his own, which I think maybe says a little bit more than when you sort of force someone to talk about a particular guy. So someone else that Carolina's gone out and brought in from the NFL, former Panthers NFL guy, and it sounds like has really fit in well with that quarterback room in terms of helping the guys with some things, being just a different voice, different set of eyes, and kind of being a resource for D-Lo, as apparently Dow Loggins now goes by. But I thought that was intriguing. They kind of have worked on Tanner's mechanics a little bit in his stride and just, tweaking some stuff like that. So it sounds like Sean Ryan, a good addition to this program. Again, just that he brought him up without even being asked about it, I thought was telling.
Well, I think it makes a lot of sense, and we talked about this when Sean Ryan was came on at South Carolina a couple weeks ago. Both he and Dow Loggins, or D-Lo, I guess we're going to call him now, have spent so much time in the NFL. That their philosophies are going to be probably pretty similar, given the fact that they've just been at that level for so long, and are coming back down to the college ranks here. So very interested to see how all that meshes together for the new offense this year.
And if I'm a quarterback, I'm intrigued by that. I am probably pretty happy about that, assuming, this is always the big caveat, I guess, with NFL guys, assuming you can translate it down to the college level. And the fact that, for one, obviously, these are college kids, but for two, they don't have all day, all week to be in your facility. They have to go to class. NCAA has rules on how much time you can require them to be in the building or on the field. And all these things keep you from being able to do the things that an NFL team would do as far as putting in a much more complex offense or defense or special teams or whatever. So I think when you bring in the NFL guys, that's always the key, is can they translate it to college? But so far, so good, it sounds like. And we obviously, everybody heard the rumors, the stuff about things being a little bit too complex maybe the last couple of years. It seems like lots of moves have been made to not go in that direction this year.
Now, from the little bit that you've been able to see of practice so far this spring, the handful of times you've been out there, is there anything from Tanner that you've been able to see at all?
Not a ton, man, honestly. When we've seen 11 on 11, it's been ones versus ones or twos versus twos, and that has always been Rattler or Doty. So I have not. That's one thing I'm kind of looking forward to seeing on Saturday. And Tanner talked about it. This is going to be his first real opportunity to go out there and play in Willie B. Most quarterbacks actually enroll early,
right?
So I had kind of forgotten until he reminded me that he was not an early enrollee. He finished out his baseball career in high school,
right?
So this will be his first opportunity to really go play in front of the fans, which will be cool for him. It'll be good for us to get a look at him. He did, he mentioned he's a gamer. He has that vibe. If you watch his highlights, is one of those guys that, maybe isn't the absolute fastest, but has a knack for extending plays and keeping his eyes downfield and throwing the ball. Again, not the biggest. He's kind of he's the opposite of the sort of 6'5", can throw the ball 70 yards type quarterback that people sometimes fall in love with from a evaluation and recruiting ranking standpoint. He's more of the I'm going to get the job done type QB. Was very accurate in high school, had put up huge numbers, and I really have not been able to watch him other than just the stuff he and I we're talking about, where you're throwing in a bucket or throwing in a net, throwing against air, throwing maybe some one-on-ones here and there, but this will be our first real opportunity to watch him in a true 11-on-11 situation, which will be good from an information standpoint.
Again, that spring game coming up Saturday night at 7 o'clock. I'll have coverage for you here on 107.5 The Game. We'll talk a little bit more about spring practice on the other side. Got plenty to talk about today. Also, the WNBA draft taking place last night. Very well represented with the Gamecocks there. As we hit this break, though, want to let you know that tomorrow morning, the early game with Bill Gunner and Preston Thorne going to be broadcasting live from Capital City Club from 6 to 9 a.m., sponsored by Columbia Executive and Owners Association. Throughout the morning, Bill and Preston will be talking to members of the association and sharing how you might be able to be involved in Columbia's premier business association. Again, that's tomorrow morning, the early game from 6 to 9 a.m. with Bill and Preston. We'll be right back. Listen to the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs, 107.5 The Game.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs, founded by firemen with Chris Clark, Wes Mitchell, and Tyler Head on your home of the Gamecocks, 107.5 The Game.
And welcome back into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on 107.5 The Game. Tyler Head and Wes Mitchell along with you on a beautiful, beautiful Tuesday morning. Speaking of Tuesday, it's also my favorite day as far as the sub of the day goes at Firehouse Subs.
About the only good thing about a Tuesday, Tyler. Turkey Bacon Ranch, Firehouse Subs, sub of the day, $7.99 medium. Go to firehousesubs.com, hit that rapid rescue, order online, or just go ahead and download the app. You can save all your information in there, so anytime you are filling that Firehouse Subs, you can just hit it. They'll have it waiting on you. There's 1,000 Firehouse Subs locations, slight exaggeration here in Columbia. But, our friend Larry Chandler, he's adding new Firehouse locations all the time.
Right.
It seems. So if you're in Columbia, chances are there's one right by you. Rapid Rescue is the way to go. Turkey Bacon Ranch on Tuesday is also the way to go. Also, if you want to try something new, try the new Smokin' Triple Stack. 3 meats, 1 epic sub. By the way, you're right, man. It is gorgeous outside. I hope we have similar weather for the spring game on Saturday.
Yep.
And I wish we had this weather on this past Saturday because we could have played some baseball. Is the rule about SEC baseball not playing on Sunday just about travel if you have a Thursday, Friday, Saturday?
Yeah, so the rule is essentially whatever the last day of the series schedule is, that's when games have to be completed by. So essentially they treated, because Georgia and Kentucky played a Friday through Sunday series. I think they even played a doubleheader on Sunday, making up for the game they lost on Saturday. But for whatever reason, this is how the SEC does their rules. I can't speak to the other conferences, but I'm sure there are some out there that are similar to this, where if you start on Thursday, all your games got to be wrapped up on Saturday because they're essentially viewing Sunday as almost like a Monday for LSU as their quote-unquote travel day. So all games have to be wrapped up on Saturday. And the only exception being at the end of the regular season when you have the open Sunday, and that's only if the game that needs to be made up affects seeding for the conference tournament. That's the only exception to that rule in the SEC. Why that is, I don't know. That's just what the rules are.
I don't like it.
I don't shoot the messenger. I'm just passing along the information.
I don't get it. I mean, and maybe it involves the rules of the NCAA rules too, potentially about hours that can be contributed to a sport. But
it's possible.
That makes zero. I mean, I get not carrying over into a Monday.
Sure,
but even then, it's like, okay, so we can block off a Thursday if we planned it,
right?
But you can't miss class on Monday,
right?
But in this case, common sense there was no way you were playing that game on Saturday.
Yeah, no, and they were debating trying to get it in on Friday. They kept reconvening every hour, every 45 minutes, something like that. But we all knew once that rain started, it wasn't going to stop until early Sunday morning. So it completely washed it out. And yeah, we had a beautiful day on Sunday, a little bit windy, but
Sunday would have been a great day for baseball.
It would have been. Unfortunately, again, the rules are the rules, and kind of handcuffed by that. Unfortunately,
I just hope it's not one of those. Well, this is the way it is because it's the way we've always done it. Type rules.
It may be, and we know that the NCAA has quite a few of those rules deep in their rule book. They just haven't been changed, but sometimes things can push for that to be changed. But typically, I feel like you don't run into situations where you have a day and a half worth of rain nonstop for the most part throughout the spring. I don't know how many times the situation has come up for a Thursday through Saturday series. I know this isn't the first time, certainly, but I guess it hasn't been ever present enough to really force a change. But maybe after this season, they'll do something.
They should. All right, I'm done yelling at clouds for the day.
That's all right. The weather is looking really good for this Saturday night and the spring game. Temperatures looking to be in the 80s all day, around mid-70s at, I guess we can call it kickoff. They're not going to do a kickoff, but we'll call it kickoff just for the heck of it. Yeah, I know you said that this morning they kind of moved the schedule around. You weren't able to get out there and observe practice. But as we talked about last week, I don't think there's anything too surprising that you would see over these next couple of days leading up to the spring game, just getting those last-minute reps in and, preparing for the end of spring practice.
Yeah, certainly. Beamer talked, I guess that would have been last week, Tyler, about how he felt like they let up a little bit this time last year. And one thing I've noticed about Beamer, and I believe he even said this, he does a phenomenal job of taking notes throughout a particular year. And certainly, I think if you are a new coach and this is your first or second year as a head coach, there are going to be certain things that maybe on paper and by design, you feel like, oh, this is going to work out great. And then when you do it in reality, you're like, I just didn't like how that worked out. So I think one thing he's done throughout his time at South Carolina is take notes based on the reaction to things, how things have worked, and then having those things when you go back, or when you move forward a year ahead from now, you kind of look back. All right, when we were at this point in the process last year, what did we do that worked? What do we do that we need to scrap or tweak or whatever? And he felt like they had a really good spring last year, but then tailed off a little bit towards the end. So I think that'll be something to watch. I don't know if we'll know from the outside, but internally, it sounds like they're going to do everything they can to keep pushing and challenging the guys to keep it going. And then so Beamer will speak today at 12:30.
Yep.
We'll find out. It could be a little bit of a newsworthy press conference just in terms of we may find out, for one, injuries, who might be available on Saturday, and then maybe we'll get some details on how they're actually going to format this thing. Will it be like last year, which was 2 actual split squads, one versus one, or excuse me, Team A versus Team B, as opposed to some schools do actually just say, hey, we're going to just put the ones and the ones out there, then the twos and the twos. If you lack depth, you sometimes have to do that. Carolina has had enough depth, at least last year, to split it up.
Right.
We'll see what that approach is.
One thing that always happens for any spring game, no matter what school you're at, there's always that one guy that kind of ends up being the superstar of the spring game that more often than not, you really don't end up hearing about too much in the fall. I know you've been covering this team for a long time. Is there a particular spring game all-star that comes to mind to you that you've seen in years past?
I'm going to go way back.
Okay.
The Gamecock fans that are like fresh out of college are going to have no idea what I'm talking about. Taqi Muhammad.
All right.
Was a guy. This was in the infancy of the sports media website era.
Okay. Way back.
I mean, way back. This is Lou Holtz era.
All right.
And Taqi Muhammad came in, was a defensive back, and they were lacking playmakers on offense, and they moved him to wide receiver. And my man went off. And then, no offense to Taqi, but it did not translate over into the regular season playing offense. I think he eventually moved back to defense. And,
Right.
Finished. Bobby Wallace was a guy who had some big springs. I know there are others. That actually is a great question for our Firehouse Subs text line.
Okay.
Because I think the fans will probably have some other guys come to mind there, Tyler.
Yeah, so on our Firehouse Subs text line, 803-404-6100, is there anybody that you can remember was a spring game all-star that maybe didn't end up doing too much that fall or elsewhere in their South Carolina career? Let us know, and we'll read them throughout the rest of the show here. So running into this break, I want to let you know that coming up next weekend, April 22nd and 23rd, Monster Jam Arena Championship Series comes to Colonial Life Arena. You can experience world-class championship drivers show off crazy skills in head-to-head battles for the championship. Keep it locked right here on 107.5 The Game all week long, as we'll be giving away tickets throughout each and every day. You can also go online and register to win a family 4-pack of tickets and a 4-pack of pit passes on our website, 1075thegame.com. Coming up next, we'll talk a little bit about the WNBA draft, as South Carolina was very well represented last night. You're listening to the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs on 107.5 The Game.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. Presented by Firehouse Subs. Founded by firemen with Chris Clark, Wes Mitchell, and Tyler Head on your home of the Gamecocks. 107.5 The Game.
With the first pick in the 2023 WNBA draft, the Indiana Fever select Aaliyah Boston, University of South Carolina.
You heard it last night on ESPN. To no one's surprise, Aaliyah Boston becomes the number 1 pick in the 2023 WNBA draft, being selected by the Indiana Fever. She is now the second Gamecock women's basketball player to go number 1 overall. The other, of course, being Asia Wilson. And now, Kendall and I were talking about this earlier. It's so funny how different the WNBA is, because, of course, they play their season pretty much over the course of the summer, as the NBA season is wrapping up and going through their playoffs and stuff. So, right at 2 weeks ago, you play the Final Four. A couple days after that, we get the announcement, hey, Lee Boston's going to the draft, as we expected. Now she's getting drafted. And then the WNBA season literally starts in a month, the middle of May. They really hit the ground running with this. There's no time to breathe for these girls.
Yeah, get ready, time to roll. And, luckily, I think basketball is a sport where you can kind of jump right in and go.
Sure.
Not like football, and I know you have plays in basketball, but you can also have success playing basketball without everything being completely structured. Football, every single play is structured down to the T, so I think you can dive right in, and certainly I think these girls will be excited to go ahead and hop in there and get ready to play. And no surprise to anyone on the planet, Aaliyah Boston, number 1, a franchise player, has everything you would look for in that. And, man, Tyler, so 5 Gamecocks drafted yesterday.
Yep.
I don't know if we knew if Saxton was going to necessarily get drafted. She did. Congrats to her, obviously. So 18 South Carolina women in the history of the program now have been drafted. And so Saxton, who was the last of the day yesterday for Carolina, 14th of the Dawn Staley era at South Carolina. Doesn't it feel almost like the WNBA is soon just going to be a bunch of former Gamecocks, UConn, Tennessee, Stanford, LSU, maybe a little Iowa players, all just mixed up playing against each other?
When you look at the rundown of who got drafted last night, those are the school names that literally pop up the most out of any of them. And it looks like South Carolina with 5 was the most well represented last night. I don't see anybody else that had more than 1 or 2. I see South Florida with a couple, and then Southern Cal had a couple as well, and obviously Stanford had a few. But yeah, it looks like South Carolina won the night with 5 different women being drafted.
And that actually has happened before, but not very often. Carolina also, obviously, with the 3 going in the first round. Carolina itself has actually had that happen before,
right?
Back in 2017, but obviously still something very special and something to, I would say, celebrate, because it kind of, we've talked about everything the freshies have done in their career and how special it's been, the number of SEC championships they've won, both regular season and tournament, the national title, the Final Fours. You'll always wonder what would have happened if the COVID year didn't take away an opportunity. But for them to come in together, the number 1 class, and then stay together throughout, win a national title along the way, and then all 4 get drafted is just completely special and unheard of. And so, as I kind of expected, Zaya Cook does end up going in the first round, even
Correct.
though the projections did not have her there leading in. That surprised me. I know we talked about that yesterday. But then on the flip side, you had Bree Bill dropping quite a bit, which was I would say a pretty massive surprise.
Yeah, she was expected to be on that back half of the first round. She ends up falling all the way to the last pick of the second round, going 24th overall to the Minnesota Lynx. The exact reason for that, we don't know exactly. I do feel like we're probably all pretty sure she's going to have a successful career at the next level, but that was definitely the surprise of the night, seeing her fall that far.
Yeah, and hated it for her, but I think she honestly is the type who will use that as huge motivation
For sure.
moving forward. And we talked about it yesterday, man. You get drafted in the second round, it's not comparable necessarily to getting drafted in the second round in some other sports. Like, you're not guaranteed your spot, but talent-wise, her ability to play defense, the improving offensive game that she showed this past season, and just, you got to think, coming from a Dawn Staley-led program,
Right.
you're going to be ahead of the curve compared to a lot of your sort of contemporaries, a lot of the people you're going to be playing against.
And obviously having 5 women drafted last night already says a lot about the Dawn Staley program and Leah Boston going number 1 overall. But I think the biggest impact, and everybody was talking about this being the steal of the draft, was Letisa Ami here going number 8 to the Atlanta Dream. And she started 4 games in her entire time here at South Carolina, obviously coming off the bench a lot, but a solid contributor despite the fact she doesn't, play but, 15 or 16 minutes a game. But that, again, speaks to what Dawn Staley has built and the depth of this program. Letisa Ami here, if she goes anywhere else in the country, she's a regular starter for just about any team, but she's coming off the bench of South Carolina, made the most for minutes there, and I think she's going to have a really good career at the next level, and the Atlanta Dream think that as well, obviously picking her with the number 8 pick.
Yeah, she will go from being a off-the-bench star at Carolina to being a starter in the WNBA, which is insane to think about. But also, I think if you're Dawn Staley, in a kind of weird way, I kind of think you use that in recruiting. Like, I know everybody wants to play, but
sure.
There's certain girls you're never going to get because they want to just go in and be the superstar.
Yep.
And Staley has talked about that. Hey, I have lost out on top prospects before because I was honest by saying, look, you are not going to come in and just be a volume scorer here. You're not going to be the only person on the court. Well, I think the fact you can still get to where you're trying to go while playing a role speaks to where the program is as a whole. And it's not apples to apples. It seems like I always steer everything back to football. That's not what I'm trying to do. But it actually reminds me very much of Nick Saban and how at Alabama you have this thing where you're going to come in, you might be a top 10 prospect out of high school, but you will wait your turn, and then when it's your turn, you go contribute and do what you're supposed to do, and then you go get drafted. It's just kind of the Alabama way in football. I think that is now the South Carolina way in women's basketball. And so I actually saw, we were talking about this yesterday, Tyler. I saw another 2024 draft big board, and I think this is the same three we mentioned yesterday.
Okay.
Caitlin Clark 1,
Right.
Paige Beckers 2, Angel Reese 3. They have Haley Van Lith, who's in the transfer portal,
Right.
at 4. Rumors connecting her to LSU. That would be interesting.
Yes.
Cameron Brink 5 from Stanford, and then Aaliyah Edwards 6, who is from UConn. I do still believe we're going to see Camila Cardoso enter into that conversation. Now, that is a loaded top 3 and a pretty loaded top 5.
Right.
But she'll be, I believe, heavily in that mix this time next year.
Yeah, and I feel like for as much attention as South Carolina gets outside of maybe us that, follow the team on a day in, day out basis, the national media hasn't gotten enough of a look at Camila Cardoso yet. And when she's starting every game next year, I think she's going to open up a lot of eyes and will certainly shoot up that draft board as the season goes along.
And she's going to have a long, productive WNBA career as well. But I think she also will be in a place next year for Carolina where there probably won't be the depth we've seen them have. And that's going to mean a huge opportunity for her to score a bunch of points and obviously get a ton of rebounds next year.
Right. Leah Boston, not the only one getting selected by the Indiana Fever. Victoria Saxton goes at the first pick of the third round, number 25 overall, also going to the Indiana Fever. And kind of similar to what we talked about with Bria Beal, when you get selected in these later rounds, you're not really guaranteed anything at the next level. So Victoria's going to have her work cut out for her once she gets up there to Indiana, but she's going to have some known company around her with Aaliyah Boston. And somebody pointed out the other day, Destiny Henderson also up there with the Fever as well.
I wonder how much that pick came from them knowing they were going to pick Boston, probably putting a ton of resources into evaluating Boston.
Sure.
Doing everything you could to kind of, I don't know what the rules are on how much you can get to know a player, but, they obviously were paying a ton of attention to this program, probably in contact with Dawn Staley quite a bit. And it does make you wonder, maybe along the way they said, well, look, this is somebody we could go get in a later round,
right?
Who would have a comfort level with our new star player and could potentially be a fit off the bench and would be willing to do whatever it takes to succeed.
Yeah, absolutely. And you got to imagine that, if maybe they didn't have as much contact with Victoria, that Aaliyah Boston at some point probably mentioned, like, hey, if she's available in one of these later rounds, go and grab her. She can do X, Y, and Z for you. I have full confidence in her. Again, she's going to have her work cut out for her, but I think we all have confidence that she's going to be able to get it done at the next level.
Yeah, no doubt, man. So we'll all be watching. As you said, it'll be soon.
Absolutely. I want to let you know once again that tomorrow morning, the early game with Bill and Preston going to be broadcasting live from Capital City Club tomorrow from 6 to 9 a.m. It's going to be sponsored by Columbia Executive and Owners Association. Throughout the morning, Bill and Preston will be talking to members of the association, and they will share how you might be able to get involved in Columbia's premier business association. Again, that's the early game tomorrow morning from 6 until 9 at the Capital City Club. We'll come back on the other side and wrap up today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs on 107.5 The Game.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs, founded by firemen with Chris Clark, Wes Mitchell, and Tyler Head on your home of the Gamecocks, 107.5 The Game.
Yeah.
And welcome back into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. Todd Head and Wes Mitchell along with you for a few more minutes. As always, we want to thank our friends over at Integrated Media for being a great sponsor of the show. And pretty soon you'll be able to see our beautiful faces as they are setting up these live cameras for us. So you'll get to watch us in real time before too long.
Yeah, Integrated Media has hooked us up with some high-tech equipment here that I can see, some Sony cameras. These things could not have been cheap. But 803-948-8327. I'm guessing you don't need a high-tech studio in your home. But if you do,
if you want one,
they can help you out. IntegratedMediaInc.com. They specialize in your home audio and visual, anything that involves a TV, maybe some surround sound, maybe a theater system, maybe some outdoor music. I always feel like if I'm at a cookout, the extra sort of speaker that's hooked up outside, so where you can kind of hang out outside and hear the music outside, is a great element. So if you want to make your home the one where everybody comes to watch the big game, or if you just want to enjoy it for yourself, watching Carolina baseball, watching football, whatever it may be, Integrated Media is your local specialist when it comes to smart home installation, security system installation, or anything else involving the above. 803-948-8327.
Baseball back in action tonight, taking on USC Upstate. First pitch for that will be at 7 o'clock. Pre-game coverage can be heard right here on 107.5. The game starting at 6:45. This is an Upstate team that South Carolina played earlier on in the season up at Floor Field. Beat them pretty handily, 19-1. We've obviously seen in weeks past that sometimes these midweek games can get you, and especially sandwiched between two big series against LSU and Vanderbilt. So focusing on the task at hand tonight, and then looking forward to another big series this weekend against the Commodores.
No doubt. I dare say you want the 7 inning, just get it done.
It'd be nice.
And get out of here. Now, there has been some discussion about sometimes you like having those last couple of innings because it's an opportunity to get at bats.
Sure.
And get innings for guys who maybe don't normally play. So what do you think, Tyler? Is the advantage for a team like South Carolina in just getting in and getting out and taking your dub?
Yeah.
Or is the advantage because, if you're winning by 8 or 9, but not sort of at that 10 threshold, you
Sure.
feel pretty comfortable in a midweek, I think, going to your guys that aren't going to play. Now, we saw Carolina against a team like LSU.
Yeah.
They were up pretty big, and they still decided on that Thursday game to go to their better arms. But midweek, a team like this, is it better to get guys ABs and innings, or is it better to just be done with it and move on to the next?
I think getting guys reps is always good because at the back of your mind, you're always worried about those injuries, which we know has crept up on the Gamecocks here over the past couple weeks. So if you have to dive a little bit deeper into that roster as the season goes along, and again, not to mention the big series coming up against Florida, Arkansas, Kentucky, you can't, let up on any of these teams. You want to have your best every single weekend. So if you can get these guys a couple more reps, a few more bats, maybe get somebody an inning or two in relief in the 8th or 9th tonight, that certainly gives you at least a little more assurance going forward should you need to rely on those guys in one of these big series here in the regular season.
I think I agree, man. In some ways you may think, you're not getting much out of a couple of innings when you're up by 12 runs, for example. Right. But for those guys who don't normally play, anybody that's played any baseball knows there's just nothing quite like an actual live rep with a real pitcher throwing your way. You can simulate it. I know Carolina's big into using their pitching machines at times.
Yep.
They use that to try and simulate the LSU stud. He was throwing 101 or whatever it was. But live pitching is kind of difficult to simulate. So if I'm a freshman, or if I'm a reserve who doesn't really play, I think it's a great point, man. You never know when you're going to have to rely on that backup player. And in the case of Carolina, you've had enough injuries now. It might be somebody who was your third string second baseman to start the year, and now all of a sudden they're going to have to go play. So I agree. I think it's a kind of a missed opportunity there for those kids to go get some development time.
Yeah, and tonight's pitching matchup, as expected, it's going to be Matthew Becker on the mound for the Gamecocks. He did get the start last time that they played USC Upstate and won that game 19-1. He gave up 4 hits and just 1 run in that contest. On the other side is Caleb Costa. He did not start that game right at a month ago. He did pitch 1 2/3 innings, giving up 3 hits and 1 run. So some familiarity there. And as we expect with these midweek games, it's going to be a whole staff night. You're going to have Becker go probably 3 innings, then just kind of go through your guys, 3 or 4 more guys as you go through the rest of the game. And, like we talked about, just trying to get reps for as many people as you can and get set for another big series this weekend against another top 5 team in Vanderbilt.
Are you a little surprised that they went Becker? I know he pitched great last week against UNC.
Sure.
You know where I'm going. You got to fill a lot of spots this weekend.
Still some questions about what's going on with Noah Hall. Now, Coach Kingston has not offered anything up in terms of a timetable for when he might return, so you do still have that question mark. Obviously, you didn't have to address it this past weekend because the LSU series did not go to 3 games. They had moved Mahoney up to that Friday afternoon start. Would have been Friday night start. But yeah, still some question marks there. So,
does this tell us anything? Like, I mean, obviously, you're talking about Tuesday to Sunday. So
right.
if he has a short outing today, he actually still could start on a fairly regular outing on Sunday.
Or maybe you're planning on going with Eli Jones. Again, this is assuming that Noah Hall's not going to be ready to go by Sunday, and who knows, maybe you could be. Yeah. But, Kingston's not been committal to anything regarding that. It just kind of gives us the one game at a time approach, and for tonight, it's going to be Becker on the mound, and that's all we know up to this point.
Yeah, so we'll see. It kind of makes me wonder if maybe Eli Jones is going to be the guy, assuming they have to fill that role. But we'll all find out. Hey, Braves walk-off win last night. Did you watch it?
I was thinking we about have a 4-game losing streak because they were up 3-1, got up 3-1 in the bottom of the 8th, and then the Reds just rallied back in the top of the 9th, tying the game up, and then I'm like, they tied the game up at 3, and then they got the run in.
Ghost Runner scored.
Ghost Runner, which, by the way, that's the first extra inning game the Braves have played this season. I completely forgot about the Ghost Runner.
And like, what is that guy doing out there?
And so when the run scored on the first batter, I'm like, wait a minute, how'd that happen? Oh, that's right. We have the Ghost Runner on second for extra innings, which it ended up working out for the Braves because Sean Murphy comes up there, gets his first home run as a Brave, and ends up driving in 2 runs instead of just 1 when it would have been a solo shot. So good to see them finally get back on track after a very rough weekend against the Padres.
Yeah, that was a good win. I'm with you, man. I was like, are they really about to lose? But it's so funny, man. Baseball, you went almost all last year without losing 3 in a row.
Yep.
And I think, did they finally lose 3 in a row at some point late last year?
I think they season.
Did. But literally, that was the big thing throughout the year.
Sure.
They weren't really winning a bunch in a row, but they had not lost 3 in a row pretty much all last year. And then you get off to what is kind of an uncharacteristic fast start.
Yep.
Start 6-1. And then what does baseball do? It evens you out.
It does.
Because it always does. By you have this 3-game skid. You're staring 4 games right in the face because this is a team, the way their offense is built, they can score a lot of the time. They obviously use the home run ball quite a bit, but it has not been conducive to success in extra innings games because teams that are a little bit more small ball focused, I feel like, have been able to put that run across and then put pressure. How many times have they had the Ghost Runner on second and he just doesn't even move?
Sure.
But then Murphy, obviously, I think that was the first pitch. He was quoted as saying, I was just trying to do a job.
Yep.
But that was a home run swing.
Oh, absolutely.
He put everything he had into that, and I'm sure a special moment for him. Felt like he wasn't quite settled in his first week in Atlanta. You're already starting to see him get more comfortable, I think.
And then with Darno being on the shelf for the week with the concussion, he's definitely going to be holding up that catcher position for the next couple of days, and hopefully Darno can return good and healthy next week and continue on what's been a good season for him. A little bit of shakiness with the starting rotation these past couple of days. Obviously, you've had Max Fried out since that Game 1 injury. You do have Kyle Wright returning tonight for the Game 2 against the Reds, so hopefully getting things back on track with the starting rotation as well.
We'll be watching, man.
Absolutely. That'll do it for today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. Halftime show with Jay and Terry coming up next on 107.5 The Game.